To what lengths would you go to uncover your past? Well, Audrey Sullivan, a Chinese adoptee raised by white parents, decided to go all the way to China. Audrey initially makes the trip to secure her promotion to partner at a prestigious law firm if she can close a deal with a Chinese businessman. But her childhood best friend Lolo encourages her to take a quick side trip to meet her birth mother. So Audrey, Lolo's K-pop obsessed cousin Deadeye, and Audrey's college roommate and close friend Kat all decide to take a bit of a joyride. I'm Ronald Young Jr., and I'm leaving the theater. All right, I'm just going to tell them. That way they won't bother us. Hi. Do you mind if we record a podcast in that corner right over there?
Say that again?
Do you mind if we stand in that corner over there and record a podcast?
That's fine.
Okay, great. You're not going to bother nobody, I promise. Okay, great. All right, this is Ronald, and I'm leaving the theater after seeing Joyride. Joyride, directed by Adele Lim, written by Chevapravatdumrong and Teresa Hsiao. Starring Ashley Park, Sherry Cola, Stephanie Su, Sabrina Wu, Ronny Chieng, Lori Tan Chen, Alexander Hodge, and Chris Pang. And for a full cast listing, as always, you can go to the link in our show notes. I'm not here alone. I'm here with
Jonquilyn Hill.
Jonquilyn Hill. Welcome back to the show.
It is so good to be back. It is so good to be back. Wow, what a movie to return for.
I know, right?
Very different from the last film we watched.
You know what? This is like the polar opposite. I'm now just realizing.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't even think about that. Because the last one we watched, we talked through we trauma bonded all the way through. This one, we were riveted and focused on the movie.
Yeah, if I'm at home, and depending on who I'm with, I'm a movie talker. I'm not a theater movie talker. The last movie we had to talk to get through the trauma. I feel like the thread is people of color going through trauma, but this one was very different. We laughed to keep from crying in this one.
Yeah. Wait, what? Did we?
Well, I don't know. I got teary with friendship, but
I'm not going to lie. There was a few times, we'll get there. So Joyride is a movie about 4 Chinese women, and I'll leave it at that. 4 Chinese women who go on a journey to find, one of them is adopted, and they're going on a journey first to close a business deal, and then it turns into a search for her birth mother in China. Hilarity ensues. It is a movie about young women and friendship, and it was not an unfamiliar premise, but you know what? I'll just stop right there. What did you think of the movie?
I really, really enjoyed it. I have to admit, if there is a raunchy R-rated comedy, especially starring and centering women, there's a likelihood I'll like it. Like, I give it a lot, and I didn't even have to give this one a lot. I enjoyed it. It was a fun summer movie. It's definitely good for, like, a girls' night or something.
So, like, you're thinking Bridesmaids or, what's that, Booksmart?
I would say it's along the lines of Bridesmaids, along the side of Girls Trip, those type of films where it's just, like, women acting bad.
Yeah.
Which is like, I love when women act bad.
Yeah.
Act bad, like Carisha says, act bad.
Yeah, this one, I was sitting there and I realized there was blending a lot of familiar movies together, and it was still felt fresh because of the people that were doing it. Like, we've all seen, the one that was popular like about 10 years ago, The Hangover. We've seen the series of Hangovers. Girls Trip has a sequel coming out soon. They have, of course, you have Booksmart and you have Superbad. This is just friends being friends. Granted, and these are young people. They're not in high school. They're obviously post-college, which I really appreciated that they gave them money and put them in more unfamiliar scenarios than just making them just broke kids that have to find money in order to get stuff. It was more like figuring stuff out while on a trip, which I really appreciated that. And as it went on, I think I started to enjoy it more and more. And then it really started to hit this emotional note that I'm just like, oh man, I didn't really expect this. I didn't expect it to be also heartwarming.
Yeah, it had so going into this kind of movie, I was thinking, okay, I know how this plot goes, friends do a thing, wacky hijinks, oh, we're fighting, oh, we made up. But there were some real twists and turns, especially on the emotional notes in this movie that I honestly did not expect. Like, there's one moment where I'm like, oh, this is giving This American Life.
100%.
But it also still had those same tropes, like, you have the friend who's kind of the main character, seemingly perfect. You have the friend who's kind of, it takes a little more to get them there. You have sort of the socially odd one, and then you have the one that's kind of like rich and famous, and those are sort of the four archetypes you see. But this was a really cool way of going about it.
There's two shows that I'm thinking of. One is Girls, and the other one is Broad City. Now, I think Broad City is better than Girls. I think some people have described it as Girls with jokes, whereas Girls kind of does the four archetypes very well, where you have one that's kind of, like you said, one that's kind of the outcast, one that's more type A, one that's like the free spirit, all of that. And they nailed that all here, but it's not, it doesn't feel repetitive in a way, because they also give them all of them a sense of kind of groundedness in whoever they are. There's like probably only one idea of any of them not being aware of who they are, and it's still done in a way where she is still choosing to be who she is in this world until it's kind of like shattered later on.
Yeah, what I really appreciate about it, and maybe this is the thing about people of color, is that there's only so much messiness you can realistically have in your life and still be a functioning person.
I like that.
Yeah, and so it was just like, okay, even for the characters whose lives are a mess, they have their stuff together because you kind of just have to.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, that rings true. Like, the dynamics rang very true. That was very cool.
On top of all that, it's very funny. Like, it was funny, and it was also, like, I remember the way I felt when I saw Crazy Rich Asians, and being like, it's great to see a movie with this many Asian folks on camera, like in front of the camera, and it's not meant to be, like, if you see it in The Hangover, when Kim Jong shows up, it's meant to be a joke. And too often, we've seen this trope of Asian folks being docile or considered to be a joke or overly studious, or there's a lot of just really harsh stereotypes that are what is normally driving any Asian performance in a movie. And we've seen recently that that's just not the case, and especially when you're allowing Asian folks to actually do the creating of the films themselves. And Adele Lim also wrote Crazy Rich Asians, which I was like, I could see the threads and the ideas, like some of the stuff that shines through from like the glam, you know what I mean, or the sense of talking about what an American-born Chinese person is versus what a mainland Chinese person is. I like them playing with all those ideas and then still putting it behind of what does the American lens of all that look like, and then swirling around. And then also, it's flat out funny.
Yeah, I think so. The main character is adopted by white American parents, and I thought it was really interesting. Like, I'm sure you know the concept of the explanatory comma.
Yes.
Where it's just like, okay, people of color or any group are talking about something, and it's like, let's zoom out and explain. And it didn't have the explanatory comma, but what I think was very cool and felt very natural is that there's this person who is American but has sort of a basic working knowledge, and there are still things to introduce her to, and that was a way to introduce the audience. Another thing that I really appreciated about the movie is the way it dealt with the character's sexuality.
Yes.
Just because it can be, I mean, literally there are podcasts about just the different ways race can intersect with gender and sexuality and all these things. And, these were not docile women. Every single person had control of their own sexuality. And another thing that I really appreciated is that all the love interests in the movie were either Asian or men of color. And I was like, ooh, this is nice. This is not something we see, because typically I think in media, when we see a relationship like that, like, it's like there's always a white person involved. It's like, how do we get this to be, palatable? And from what I recall for the press around Crazy Rich Asians, initially when they were trying to make that movie happen, people were saying like, oh, can we get like some white people in here? Can we? And it's like, no, yeah. We're not going to do that. And I really appreciated, like, I could tell that it was a story made for and by the people that were in it. And that's something that it shows. It really shows.
I agree. I think there's something to be said about the idea of kind of like the interactions that everyone is having in this movie. It's not centered around reaching for whiteness. Like I've seen, if you look at something like Secret Lives of College Girls, of college women, college girls. I think it's the Secret Lives, the sex lives of college girls. I think you look at something where they really are centering whiteness and centering normal in a way, but they're also doing it with diverse faces. And in this movie, I think it's a very subversive way to divest from whiteness, to basically say, yes, whiteness is here. Yes, it's all a part of this, but we don't necessarily want to be sucked into it, or we're not aiming to be a part of it. If anything, we're trying to get away from it. We're trying to see what else is out there. And I think, for the ways in which the settings of all of this, like just when you see white people, they're not necessarily the good guys in this. Like, as a matter of fact, we see some parents, and then I think the other time you see a white person, they are not the good, they're the shady character that you should have probably stayed away from, which is like, I think, a very interesting way to like divest from whiteness, like generally, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it was really, I don't know, I just love the way it centered the women's stories. It sort of reminded me a little bit of Insecure.
Yes.
In that way, where it's just like, okay, but we're going to go where these women's lives are, and whoever is actually would be there is there. And also, there was a cameo from someone who was in Insecure, which was a very nice surprise. Like, I think that was the one moment I talked where I was like, that's the guy from Insecure. You
said it straight up out loud, and I think it's Russell, right? That's his character's name in the show, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know. All I know is it was Molly's Boo.
Yes, Molly's Boo.
Molly's Boo was in the movie, booing as usual, booing as he does.
The thing is, as soon as I saw him take his hair out of the tie, I was like, they got him. They got him. You might as well start swooning. They thought it was him taking his shirt off. I was like, it's not it. It's the other thing. Watch.
Yeah, it was very, like, the way it was shot. It was also shot for the female gaze.
100%.
Very much so. Like, in every instance when a man who is a love interest is introduced, the camera, it's like, oh, women were behind the camera in this. I can tell.
Okay, with all of that being said, we rate out of 5 stars here. Mm-hmm. What do you rate this movie? Now, this is a tight 90, tight 30. No, I'm sorry, tight 95. And I think that also is on its side, because I was just saying in another episode that it's going to be on my tombstone that this was a little long. This wasn't that at all.
But I will say, it didn't feel too short. They packed a lot.
They really did.
Like, because there was a moment where there was a twist, and I was like, how will you have time for this?
Yeah.
How are you going to figure this out?
And they made it work.
They
more than made it work.
Yeah, I do question. I'm like, I don't know if travel works like that. But you know what? We're here just to spin reality. We're at the movies.
Yeah. But, and that being said, 1 second before we get to ratings, I think my only drawback is I think that they should make 10 of these. Like, I think that if there's 3 hangovers, there certainly could be 3 joyrides. And I think in one way, there's a travel step in this movie where I was like, well, obviously that's the second movie. And it wasn't. And it made me say, and then there was another travel step where I was like, well, obviously that's the second movie, and it wasn't. And it makes me say that they were like, we're just going to do it in this one, and we don't know if we're going to get another one, and we'll see what happens then. And I'm very excited to see, and I hope there's enthusiasm for this movie and not a lot of racism, because I think that a movie like this could be a franchise and should be a franchise.
Oh, it was like, I really enjoyed it. Like I said, I love a raunchy R-rated comedy. There aren't enough of them anymore because, I mean, this is a little soapboxy, but we kind of keep making the same movies over and over. Correct. It's a bunch of reboots. It's a bunch of superhero movies. Yeah. And I love reboots. I love superhero movies. But sometimes I just want to be an adult and laugh. I remember when I was younger, my parents were very strict, no going to R-rated movies until you're 17. And I'm just like, I'm over the age of 17 now. Give me all the R-rated movies. Give them to me.
Yeah, fair. So what do you rate this movie? Out of 5 stars.
Ooh, okay. I'm going to give it 4.5. I really, really enjoyed it. I always bristle at giving things 5 stars because I'm like, was this Citizen Kane? But it was, I highly recommend, grab your friends, make a night of it, go to a theater where they serve wine, have a good time.
This is absolutely a 4.5 star movie. And I don't know if you were in my head, but it fluctuated from 4.5 to 4. And then I realized I think I gave The Flash, which I saw. And I'm not sure if this review will come out before or after The Flash, but obviously in the timeline in which the listeners are listening to this, I've already seen The Flash, and I gave it a 4.25 if I'm not mistaken. So I know that this movie was certainly better than The Flash. And so I watched it. I was like 4.5, 4.25, and I was like, no, I'm having a much better time here, and this is shorter. So yeah, this is a 4.5 star movie. It was emotionally great. I do not see how a sequel will rise to this. I think the best a sequel can do, especially depending on what direction they go in, can probably get above 3.5, 3.75. I get very nerdy with my scores now, if you haven't noticed. So, but yeah. So with that being said, yeah, I think it's absolutely 4.5 stars. Great acting, visually amazing. I laughed a lot. I'm going to watch it again. I want to take friends to see it. I hope all of my women friends see it. I hope all of my married men friends that are dragged to this movie by their wives are pleasantly surprised. I think they're going to enjoy this movie. I tell all my men friends to see it too. I know I got a lot of macho men friends out there. They're not going to go see this. But
they listen. They don't hold yourself back from joy.
Please don't.
Do not hold yourself back from joy.
Yeah. Please don't, literally and figuratively. So, yeah, with that, Leaving the Theater is a production of OhitsBigRon Studios. Alexandra Ketch of Bias Studios mixes the show. Thank you, Alex. Show art from Heather Wilder. Theme music by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. For more information about Joyride or Jonquilyn Hill, check out our show notes. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at OhitsBigRon. That's at OhitsBigRon. You can find out more about this show and other OhitsBigRon Studio shows by following us on Instagram at OhitsBigRon Studios and on Twitter at OhitsBigRon Stew. That's STEW. Leaving the Theater will be back soon. Thanks for listening. And thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. This was a real good one.